Hey, it's Mirella Manelli with Kenra Professional, and today I'm gonna show you the money piece, 2 ways to wear the trend. So whether your client wants something really high contrast or something really blended, these techniques I'm gonna show you are super customizable for your clients behind the chair. Now let's get right into it. So what I'm gonna show you today are 2 different money piece techniques. This side's gonna be a little bit more chunky. Think of the 90s, early 2000s chunky highlight face frame right in the front, and then this side's gonna be something a lot more blended, what we kind of see today. But the 90s chunky highlight thing is kind of coming back, so I think this will be a really great technique and kind of show you 2 versatile ways on how you can achieve something really bold or really soft and subtle. In order to show you this technique, I went ahead and split the mannequin right down the middle, and I'm gonna go ahead and start out with this chunky side. Now, traditionally what we do is section out this mohawk section, but since we're only doing half of her head, we're just gonna be kind of focusing here. So I pre-sectioned her hair for the 90s chunks right here, and I'm just using that arch of the eyebrow, and then of course just half of the head for this application today. And here's an overall visual of what the sectioning is like for our 90s, early 2000s chunks. So to get started, I'm going to just take a slice, and essentially that's exactly what these 90s chunks are just back-to-back slices. Now, how bold you want to take it is completely up to you. And you can almost kind of get a visual too. So for example, you wanted these chunks to go all the way back here, you would just slice this whole section. But since we're gonna kind of keep it more on trend, just visually looking at this, I know that I want it to be about 2 fingers lengths of a width. That's about how chunky we're kind of seeing this trend come. So essentially we're gonna kind of stop right in this zone here. And I'm gonna go ahead and tuck this away. Now you don't have to do this. You can be a little bit more free with your sectioning as you do it, but just for visual purposes, that way you kind of know exactly where we're gonna end. So I'm gonna take my very first section and just start out with a really thin slice. Now the goal with this is to keep your sections really thin, so that way you have the best saturation when you're applying your highlight. So what I'm gonna be using is the Kenra Professional Beyond Bond Lightener. This is mixed at a 1:2 mixing ratio with 20 volume developer. And I'm just gonna take this all the way to the root. We're just gonna kind of gradually work up that product. Now this type of foiling usually intimidates a lot of newer stylists or stylists that aren't used to doing scalp highlights. And the best way to kind of tackle this is to apply your product just a few inches below that root area, and then just start moving that lightener right on up. You don't wanna like oversaturate that hairline, but you wanna apply just the right amount. And that's how you're gonna prevent any bleeding spots. And I'm gonna go ahead and tri-fold this and move on to my next section. I'm gonna take another little slice right behind that. And overall, you're looking at doing about 3 to maybe 4 back-to-back slices in this section. Now, if you do have a little trouble getting really close to that root area, you can always turn your brush sideways and start to feather this up into that area. And this kind of helps get that lightener right up to the scalp, so it looks like it's growing right out of their head without oversaturating or puddling that lightener. So I'm gonna go ahead and add in 1 more. And this is exactly where we finish it off. This is how bold I want this to look. We want it about 2 fingers deep. And the whole entire reason too why we're adding in slices back to back, even though it's gonna be a chunky area, a lot of people might ask, like, why not just apply the bleach lightener without the foil and apply it like a root touch-up essentially. The foil aids in, first of all, just creating something that's so much more organized for you as you're doing your application. And because we're doing the application also in really thin sections, this is gonna allow for maximum lift. Your foil essentially acts as that heat conductor, so that way you're able to get a really bold lift, especially in this front zone. Take into account that if you are practicing on a mannequin head, the amount of lift that you're gonna get out of your bleach lightener can vary because we don't have that natural warmth coming and exuding off of our mannequin head. On a real person, you're gonna get a little bit more lift because they got that natural warmth going on. And then of course you wanna take into account the environment that you're working in. So I always say that if you're working under a really cool AC unit, might want to move to another chair so that way it's not like blasting cool air. You want to allow for that natural warmth to kind of aid in that lift. So now that we have our bold money piece with back-to-back slices here, just something to complement it, you can go in with more slices here, but what I'm really seeing is kind of trendy are these chunky highlights. So we're just gonna add in a few chunky highlights right along the side here to complete the face frame, but adding lots of bold dimension. So to add in these chunky highlights, I'm gonna go in with something more diagonal. So we're gonna just take some diagonal backs. Now just something to keep in mind, you don't really wanna add in chunky highlights right on this hairline. It'll just look really stripy. So what I like to do for chunky highlights around the face is take the highlights behind that hairline, just kind of, they're gonna be peeking through. So I'm gonna start out with a slice. So essentially we're gonna have like this bold piece, and what this does is act as a background for this bold money piece that's gonna sit right on top. So unless you wanna add this as a slice, just to complete the look, again, really customizable, completely up to you, the end result you're trying to achieve. So I'm gonna go ahead and apply my lightener. Now for these, I do like to kind of feather it in, just because I don't like that hard line as it grows out, especially for like a chunky highlight. I still want it to grow out kind of soft, so I do feather in my lightener right at that root area, and then do full saturation on the ends. So I'm just gonna add in a couple of these. Again, completely up to you how much pow you wanna add to these side sections. But personally, I also think that the money pieces look really pretty without anything right here on the side. It can look very bold, keeping it really dark on the underside. And each of my sections are gonna be about a 1/2 inch wide. And as your sections get wider, you can just take more chunks. So now I added a 1/3 chunk right here. Now that I have my diagonal back chunky highlights applied, this is going to complete the entire side face frame. We're going to start out with something with high contrast, and then it's going to fade into something with really chunky dimension, but really completing the entire look. And again, you can make this very customizable. If you wanted to add in a few more or none at all, the choice is completely yours. Now we're gonna move on to the other side where I'm gonna apply the more blended in money piece. So this type of money piece is gonna be great if you have a client that wears a really hard middle part, or she kind of wears it to both sides, or if she has a widow's peak or even something more rounded on the hairline, which most clients do. So what I love about this technique is it's gonna come in at a diagonal right on the sides, and again, this makes it really customizable to the point that you could even make this really chunky as well, or really lived in. So the main point of this technique is we're gonna follow the hairline. So regardless of how your client's hairline is, that's exactly what we're gonna do. We're gonna go parallel with all of our partings. And I'm gonna make sure that all of my sections are really, really thin. So now that I have my very first section, you can see it is parallel to her hairline. That's essentially what we want to do. I personally, for something that's more subtle around the hairline, I like to highlight right behind the hairline instead of right on the hairline, unless they are somebody who wants 100% blonde right along that face frame. But if you're working on a brunette, a lot of times I like to highlight behind it if their primary color is brunette. So just keep that in mind when you're doing a primary blonde or primary brunette. Really look at their canvas, and that's gonna help you determine where you're gonna start that highlight. So I'm gonna take my highlights right here at the base. Now for this side, I am using a board, and it's just a matter of preference if you like using a board or not. But I like this board just because it allows me to keep it a little slightly rooted. I don't really want to go all the way to that hairline, the scalp line like we did on the other side. I want to keep this a little bit more rooted and lived in the most subtle way. Now, if you are working on anybody who has a side part, usually what I recommend for side parts is take your sectioning exactly the same, but just shift that center point to their part. Now, the reason why I like tri-folding, this is just a little hot tip here, is I don't like taking this product that's built up on the bottom of the foil and bringing that all the way to the top. So that's what would happen if I folded it in half. So this is why I like tri-folding. It just gives me a clean canvas right here. So when I do pull it up, it's going to not affect what I've done here as far as like the rooted blend. For my next section, I'm gonna maintain this paralleled section, but I'm just gonna come back like literally a quarter of an inch. I wanna be pretty close to this, and we're just gonna be adding in that back-to-back highlight with pretty much very little hair in between these foils. Essentially, this is a subtle recreation of the Perfect Money Piece video. So if you wanna check out that YouTube video on the Kenra Professional channel, definitely go take a look at it. It's literally another form of doing the Perfect Money Piece. So you can see that even though I've highlighted right on top of that section, we have very little hair here. So what we're doing is adding soft dimension between each of these foils. So again, if you want to customize this, add a little bit more pow here, you would just add in more highlight in that same space. The less dimension you want, the thicker the subsections. Now, because I want to keep this money piece on this side a little bit more on the blended and slightly subtle side, I still want to obviously be able to see it, but I just want to make sure that the transition is nice and seamless. I'm going to take this section right here after I highlight it, and we're going to go ahead and tease this. So I'm going to go ahead and highlight just a little further down from the scalp. Now, the reason why I highlight further down from the scalp versus highlighting here, they're just two different techniques. What happens with this, again, a really hot tip, is when you are highlighting right at the base, you have maximum control of the size of your highlights and of your stitches. They're like almost perfect. But when we're highlighting a little off base, especially even down here, you're gonna have a little bit more of a natural and organic type of highlight application because you're highlighting with where you want the highlights to look from here. So really kind of picking and choosing, you know, do you want a lot of precision or you want something a lot more blended and natural looking? I'm gonna come and highlight down here. And then I'm gonna go ahead and tease this because I want this a little bit more rooted than what I created with these first two. Because I essentially want to create that transition with something a little closer to the root, which is right around that face frame, and then I want it to graduate into something even more rooted towards the back. Now, something to note, because I do want this rooted, even though we teased this back here, I'm going to start that blend line right in this zone, so just like a couple inches from the root area, so a lot deeper than what we did to those foils below it. So I'm going to do my application and then just kind of feather it up, do little quick strokes here, moving that lightener up, and now we have our blend. Now this completes my blended face frame highlights. I'm just gonna add in a couple of highlights on the side to complete the look. To start out, I'm gonna do another diagonal back. I like doing the diagonal backs just because it is the softest and most natural type of application, especially on the sides of the head. And I'm gonna take this whole entire section here, and I'm also gonna be using this weaving comb, which I really like. Now you can go ahead and weave these, but this is kind of like a favorite little tool of mine. And I'm gonna take this entire section here and go ahead and highlight that. I love this tool just because it highlights from all angles and it just makes it look even more lived in. Now to make it even a little bit more lived in, I'm just gonna do a light tease to this. Again, we don't really want this to look like it's growing out of the scalp. That's not what that blended highlight really looks like. We want it to look really natural. So I always apply my lightener and then start to push it up. That's how I'm gonna get that really soft blend. Now, one of the reasons why I love using Beyond Bond Lightener, especially for a face frame, is because of the bond technology built into this lightener. And usually when you're doing highlights around the hairline, this is the most fragile hair that we got going on. So you want to have the best protection possible. So that's why I really like using a lightener like this. And then of course, using a low volume developer is always gonna be best. So I'm gonna take another diagonal back section, and I want this to be kind of close. So we're looking at a 1/4 inch subsection. And again, because we're going for something really blended here, I don't wanna see too much of a line going on. So I'm gonna highlight this entire piece with this comb. So if you don't have this comb, the best way to do that is, like I mentioned earlier, highlight down towards the bottom. It's gonna give you more of that organic feel, but this tool just makes it go by so much quicker. Now you can customize the side with more highlights, but just to complete the look, just for the face frame, I only added in 2 foils. And now we're gonna go ahead and process this up to 45 minutes. We're just gonna check it every 15 minutes to see how much lift we can get out, and then we'll come back to tone. Now that she's all done processing, you can clearly see we got this really nice, bold contrast, chunky face frame, and then we got something a little bit more subtle going on the other side. So we're just gonna go ahead and tone her. I decided to use GV Rapid Toner, mix it up at a 1:2 mixing ratio, and we're just gonna apply this straight without any shadow root so you can see the true impact of both of the face frame highlights. Now the beauty of the Rapid Toner is that it processes in less than 5 minutes. So you're gonna wanna get this on pretty quickly. But a lot of times I find when using more of the warmer shades or even the cool shades, if you process this a little bit longer, it's not anything to worry about or panic. The thing that I love most about the Rapid Toners is that they do process in 5 minutes or less, and it just makes my workflow go by so much more smoothly. And I love them, especially like the GV that we're gonna be using today. We're gonna get that really beautiful gold reflection, but control with that violet tone. So that's exactly why we're gonna use that tone today. We wanna still keep it warm, but without the brass. Now with these looks, you can totally do a shadow root if you wanted to, just to kind of soften up the line. I also feel like that's something we are gonna be seeing trending with a lot of these high contrast looks, which makes it a little bit more different than what we've seen in the early 2000s. Or, you know, if you wanna go all out and really bold, straight to the scalp, just like this mannequin here, that can be really fun too. Something to note too about the Rapid Toners is that they are all intermixable. So if you wanted a little bit of beige in with your GV or maybe some VP in with your GV, you can definitely mix those two together to make a completely custom shade. Now you can see on this side, we have a lot more of a blended look, a lot more subtlety with the face frame, a lot more rooted going on. And I think this will be really fun to show you without the shadow root exactly how it lifted and what those teasy lights and board can do for you. So I'm gonna continue to put on my Rapid Toner, and as soon as I'm done applying on my very last piece, I'm gonna go ahead and start the timer for the full 5 minutes. And the reason why I want that full 5 minutes is because I want to make sure I get the best saturation of that gold violet tone. But if you wanted something a little bit more blushy of a deposit, you can process this as little as 1 to 2 minutes. Now that she's all toned and styled, you can really see the difference between our high contrast versus our blended side. We got really bold contrast, but that GV really kind of softened it up. And you can tell even the demi-permanent formula we used works really great on both techniques. Overall, you can see we got a seamless blend from this chunky high contrast here right into the sides even. But we got enough background on this underside, but you can really see these like chunky highlights really showing off in the most subtle way possible at the same time. I think it looks really great with this high contrast we got here. I think it complements it really well. And this is definitely giving that Y2K vibe. Now on the blended side, you can see we got a gorgeous end result, still really rooted going on into these beautiful blended, more of a modern type of face frame going on. And it just kisses the front hairline beautifully with that pop of blonde, still really soft, very wearable. And this is without doing a shadow root. And we got a really nice blend, again, going from that dark to light, super low maintenance, but still giving that nice pop of blonde right in the front. So I really hope you enjoyed this hair tutorial and learning 2 new ways on how to do a money piece highlight. One thing we know for sure is a money piece is here to stay and it's always evolving. So whether your client wants something really bold and chunky or really blended, these looks are really customizable to use behind the chair. Now, if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up, make sure to subscribe, share this video with a friend. And like always, you can learn more about Kenra Professional and a bunch of other techniques right here on this YouTube channel, and I will see you in the next one.